The carriage wheels crunched over frost-hardened mud as Eleanora Blackwood stared through the curtained window at the looming silhouette against the dying autumn sky. Castle Ravenscroft's spires pierced the heavy clouds like obsidian needles, its ancient stones seemingly absorbing what little daylight remained. Her breath fogged the glass as she exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to order the driver to turn back toward the village. "Too late for second thoughts, my dear," Lord Aldrich Thornfield said, his thin lips curving into what might have been a smile on a kinder face. "Remember our arrangement." Eleanora's fingers tightened around the small leather pouch in her lap, the coins inside barely enough to cover her father's most pressing debts. The remainder would come only after she fulfilled her end of the bargain, 6 months in service to the mysterious lord who dwelled in that dreadful castle. 6 months to save her family from ruin. "I haven't forgotten, my lord," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the cold dread pooling in her stomach. "I will honor our agreement." Lord Thornfield nodded, seemingly satisfied. As her father's creditor and the region's most powerful merchant, he had orchestrated this entire arrangement. When he had first proposed it over tea in their rapidly decaying manor home 3 days prior, Eleanora had been too shocked to speak. "Lord Constantine Dragomir requires a human companion with certain qualities," Thornfield had explained, examining her as one might appraise livestock. "Intelligence, musical ability, literary knowledge, someone who can bring a touch of culture to his isolated existence." His eyes had narrowed. Someone expendable. Now, as the carriage approached the castle's imposing iron gates, Eleanora steeled herself against the whispered rumors that had circulated through the village for generations. That Castle Ravenscroft's master was not human, that those who entered rarely returned, that blood was the currency he preferred above all others. Nonsense, she told herself firmly. Folk tales to frighten children. There were no such things as vampires. The gates opened without visible human intervention, groaning on ancient hinges. Eleanora clutched her small valise tighter as the carriage rolled through and began the winding ascent to the castle proper. "Remember," Thornfield said as they approached the massive front doors, "you are here as companion and nothing more. Read to him, play music if requested, engage in conversation when desired. Do not ask personal questions. Do not wander the castle unescorted. And most importantly," he fixed her with a cold stare, "do not attempt to leave before your 6 months are complete." Eleanora nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "And my family will be protected during this time? Your father's debts are suspended until your return. Not a single creditor will darken his door while you fulfill your obligation." Thornfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Consider yourself fortunate. Many would pay handsomely for such an educational opportunity." The carriage halted before doors that seemed carved from midnight itself, inlaid with silver filigree that formed intricate patterns. Protective symbols, Eleanora realized with a chill. The handles were fashioned as snarling wolves, their ruby eyes glinting in the last rays of daylight. A tall figure dressed entirely in black opened the carriage door, his face obscured by the gathering darkness. "Welcome to Castle Ravenscroft," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I am Vasile, the Lord's steward. He awaits your arrival in the Great Hall." Lord Thornfield exited first, then extended his hand to help Eleanora descend. The moment her boots touched the ancient stones of the courtyard, a strange sensation washed over her, as though invisible threads were attaching themselves to her skin, binding her to this place. Vasile took her valise with a slight bow. "Please follow me, Miss Blackwood." Thornfield cleared his throat. "I shall take my leave now. The terms have been explained to Miss Blackwood. I trust everything is in order." "The Lord is satisfied with the arrangement," Vasile confirmed. "Your payment awaits in your carriage." Eleanora's head snapped up. "Payment?" She looked between the two men. "You're being paid to bring me here." Thornfield's expression hardened. "Business is business, my dear. Your father's debts are considerable." Before she could respond, he turned and walked back to his carriage without a backward glance. Eleonora stood frozen, the full weight of her situation crashing down upon her. She wasn't merely a companion, she had been sold. "Miss Blackwood," Vasile said gently, "it would be best not to keep the master waiting." With no other choice, Eleonora followed the steward through the massive doors, which closed behind them, with a sound like a tomb being sealed. The entrance hall stretched before them, illuminated by wrought-iron candelabras, whose flames cast dancing shadows across stone walls hung with faded tapestries depicting hunting scenes of disturbing detail. The air carried the scent of beeswax, old books, and something metallic she didn't wish to identify. Vasile led her through a series of corridors, each seemingly older than the last, until they reached a set of double doors, carved with scenes of what appeared to be ancient battles. Without knocking, he pushed them open. "My lord, Miss Eleonora Blackwood has arrived." The great hall beyond was vast, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows despite the roaring fire in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. Bookcases lined the walls, interrupted occasionally by paintings so dark with age their subjects were barely discernible. A long table of polished ebony dominated the center of the room, though it was set for only one. And there, standing before one of the tall, arched windows that overlooked the valley below, was a figure that caused Eleonora's breath to catch. Lord Constantine Dragomir turned slowly to face her, and Eleonora felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. He was tall, impossibly so, with shoulders that spoke of strength barely contained by his tailored black coat. His face might have been carved from marble by a master sculptor, all sharp angles and perfect proportions, framed by raven hair that fell past his shoulders in loose waves. But it was his eyes that held her transfixed, pale silver, almost luminous in the firelight, regarding her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh to examine her very soul. "So," he said, his voice deep and accented with something ancient she couldn't place, "this is the companion Thornfield promised." He approached with fluid grace, circling her as though examining a rare specimen. "You are younger than I expected." Eleonora forced herself to stand straight, refusing to cower despite the hammering of her heart. "I am 22, my lord, old enough to understand the terms of my arrangement." A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed his face. "Are you? I wonder." He gestured toward the fire. "Come, sit. You must be cold from your journey." She followed him to a seating area near the hearth, perching on the edge of a velvet-upholstered chair, while he settled into a throne-like seat opposite her. Vasile appeared silently at her side, offering a goblet of deep red wine, which she accepted with hands she struggled to keep steady. "You need not fear poison," Lord Dragomir said, noting her hesitation. "If I wished you harm, there are far more efficient methods at my disposal." "How comforting," Eleonora replied, before she could stop herself. Instead of anger, his response was a low chuckle that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "You have spirit." "Good. The meek rarely last long here." She took a careful sip of the wine, rich, complex, and clearly expensive, before setting it aside. "May I ask what duties you expect of me, my lord? I was told I am to be a companion, but that could encompass many things." "Indeed it could." His long fingers tapped against the arm of his chair. "I require intellectual stimulation, Miss Blackwood, conversation, music, the reading of new literary works that find their way to my library. My existence is," he paused, searching for the word, "isolated. You will alleviate that isolation." "For 6 months," she clarified. Something dark flashed across his features. "Yes, for 6 months." Eleonora gathered her courage. "And then I am free to return to my family, with all debts forgiven?" "That is the arrangement Thornfield and I made, yes." Lord Dragomir rose in one fluid motion. "Vasile will show you to your chambers. You will find appropriate attire has been provided. I expect you to join me for dinner at 8 o'clock precisely." As if summoned by his name, the steward appeared at the doorway. Lord Dragomir turned back to the window, dismissing her without another word. Eleonora followed Vasile through more winding corridors and up a spiral staircase to the castle's east wing. He stopped before a door of dark wood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "Your rooms, Miss Blackwood," he said, opening the door to reveal a suite that took her breath away. The bedchamber was larger than her family's entire ground floor, dominated by a four-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet. A fire already burned in the hearth, illuminating walls lined with bookshelves and hung with tapestries of celestial scenes. A separate sitting room contained a pianoforte and a writing desk stocked with fine paper and quills. The bathroom beyond featured a copper tub large enough to swim in, with silver fixtures shaped like sea creatures. "This is excessive for a servant," she said, bewildered. Vasile's expression remained neutral. "The master does not consider you a servant, Miss Blackwood." "What then?" The steward hesitated. "A guest, of sorts." He placed her valise on a velvet bench and indicated a massive wardrobe of polished rosewood. "You will find everything you need there. A maid will assist you with dressing for dinner." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Blackwood, a word of advice. The master values honesty above all else. Do not attempt deception. He will know." With that cryptic warning, he left, the door closing silently behind him. Alone at last, Eleonora sank onto the edge of the bed, her composure finally crumbling. What had she gotten herself into? The luxury of her prison made it no less a cage. 6 months stretched before her like an eternity. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. At her response, a young woman entered, introducing herself as Lydia, assigned to be Eleonora's personal maid. With quiet efficiency, Lydia prepared a bath scented with roses and lavender, then helped Eleonora dress in a gown of deep burgundy silk that fit as though made specifically for her, which, she realized with unease, it likely had been. As Lydia styled her dark hair into an elegant arrangement, Eleonora studied her own reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman who gazed back seemed a stranger, pale skin luminous against the rich fabric, green eyes wide with apprehension, lips stained with berry tint. "You look beautiful, miss," Lydia said softly. "The master will be pleased." Something in her tone made Eleonora turn. "Lydia, how long have you served in this castle?" The maid's hand stilled momentarily. 3 years, miss. "And Lord Dragomir, is he a fair master?" "He is." Lydia seemed to choose her words carefully. "Consistent. His rules are clear. Those who follow them have nothing to fear. And those who don't?" The maid busied herself with adjusting a curl. "It is time for dinner, miss. I will show you to the dining room." The dining hall was smaller than the great hall, but no less impressive, with a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of the night sky. The table was set for 2, though Lord Dragomir was not yet present. Crystal and silver gleamed in the light of dozens of candles, and a string quartet played softly from a curtained alcove, though Eleonora could not see the musicians. She had barely seated herself when the air in the room seemed to change, growing heavier, charged with an energy that raised the fine hairs on her arms. Lord Dragomir appeared in the doorway, now dressed in evening attire of such perfect cut, it emphasized his otherworldly beauty. He moved to the table with that same unsettling grace and took his seat at the head. "You look exquisite," he said, his silver eyes traveling over her with undisguised appreciation. "That color suits you, like wine against snow." "Thank you, my lord," she replied, fighting the unwelcome warmth his words kindled. "The gown is beautiful, if somewhat more elaborate than I'm accustomed to." "You will become accustomed to many things during your stay, Miss Blackwood." Servants appeared, serving the first course, a delicate soup that Eleonora couldn't identify but found delicious. She noticed, however, that while her plate was replaced with each new course, Lord Dragomir merely sipped occasionally from his crystal goblet, which contained a liquid too dark and thick to be wine. "You're not eating," she observed, setting down her fork. "I have already dined," he replied, his expression revealing nothing. Eleonora took a deliberate breath. "On what, my lord? Or should I ask, on whom?" The music stopped abruptly. The servants froze. Lord Dragomir's eyes narrowed, then unexpectedly his lips curved into a smile that displayed teeth too white and sharp to be human. "Ah," he said softly, "so you are aware of what I am. I wondered how long it would take you to acknowledge it." "The villagers have stories," she replied, striving for calm she did not feel. "I dismissed them as superstition until this moment." He leaned forward, the candlelight casting shadows across the planes of his face. "And now that you know the truth, are you afraid, Eleonora?" The use of her given name sent an involuntary shiver through her. "Should I be?" Most mortals would be. He studied her with newfound interest. "But you are not most mortals, are you?" Before she could respond, he continued, "To answer your question, no, I have not fed on any of the castle staff. I have arrangements with willing donors in neighboring villages." His smile turned sardonic. "I am a monster, perhaps, but not without ethics." "How reassuring," Eleonora said, echoing her earlier sarcasm despite the fear coiling in her stomach. To her surprise, Lord Dragomir laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that momentarily transformed his face into something almost human. "You continue to intrigue me, Miss Blackwood. Most in your position would be begging for mercy or attempting escape by now. Would either approach be successful?" "No," he said simply. "You agreed to 6 months. 6 months you shall remain." Eleonora straightened her spine. "Then it seems I have little choice but to make the best of my situation. However, I would appreciate honesty between us, my lord. No more pretense." Lord Dragomir regarded her for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Very well. What would you know?" "Everything," she said without hesitation. "If I am to be your companion for these months, I wish to understand what that truly means." Something flickered in his silver eyes, something ancient and hungry that made her breath catch. "Be careful what you ask for, Eleonora. Some knowledge cannot be unlearned." He rose from his chair and extended his hand to her. "Come, there is something I must show you." With a courage she didn't know she possessed, Eleonora placed her hand in his. His skin was cool but not cold, and unnaturally smooth like polished marble. The contact sent a jolt through her that was not entirely unpleasant. He led her from the dining hall, through corridors she hadn't yet seen, and down a spiraling staircase that seemed to descend into the very heart of the mountain upon which the castle was built. The air grew colder, heavier, with the scent of earth and stone and age. They emerged into a circular chamber lit by torches that burned with blue-tinged flame. At its center stood a stone altar, and upon it a small wooden chest inlaid with silver and gems. "This," Lord Dragomir said, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber, "is why you are here. Why Thornfield selected you specifically from all the young women in the region." He released her hand and moved to the altar. "This is what makes you more than merely a companion to alleviate my loneliness." He opened the chest. Within lay a necklace that seemed to capture and refract the torchlight, a blood-red stone set in intricate silver filigree. Suspended on a chain of such fine links it appeared almost fluid. "The bloodstone of Bathory," he said, his voice taking on a reverence that sent chills down her spine. "Created 5 centuries ago from the crystallized tears of a dying sorceress, mixed with the blood of a vampire lord. My ancestor." His eyes met hers, luminous in the dim light. "Legend claims that when worn by a mortal woman with a specific bloodline during a ritual performed on the winter solstice, it grants a vampire the ability to walk in daylight once more." Eleonora felt the blood drain from her face as understanding dawned. "And you believe I have this bloodline?" It wasn't a question, but he answered regardless, his voice soft yet terrible in its certainty. "I know you do, Eleonora. Your mother's maiden name was Bathory, was it not? A direct descendant of the Hungarian countess herself, though your family has long forgotten its noble origins." He lifted the necklace from its resting place, the stone seeming to pulse with inner light. "When you arrived, I knew immediately. I could smell it in your blood, the power, the potential. "So I am not here as a companion at all," she whispered. "I am here to be sacrificed." Lord Dragomir stepped closer, the necklace dangling from his fingers like a hypnotist's charm. "Not sacrificed, no. The ritual requires life, not death." His eyes held hers, and she found herself unable to look away. "But it does require something more intimate than conversation, more binding than a business arrangement." He reached out, tracing one cool finger down her cheek in a caress that was both tender and possessive. "In 3 months' time, when the winter solstice arrives, you will not merely be my companion, Eleanora Blackwood." The necklace's crimson glow reflected in his silver eyes as his voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "You will be my bride." Eleanora stood frozen, the weight of Lord Dragomir's revelation pressing down upon her like the mountain above them. The chamber seemed to spin around her, its ancient walls closing in as the implications of his words took root in her mind. "Your bride," she repeated, her voice hollow, "not a companion for 6 months, but a wife for eternity." "Perceptive," he murmured, returning the bloodstone to its chest with reverence. "Most would be overcome with terror by now. Who says I'm not?" Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I simply see no benefit in displaying it before a predator." A smile touched his lips. "Indeed, your composure is unusual. It suggests you are precisely what I've spent decades searching for." Eleanora took a deliberate step back. "I agreed to be your companion for 6 months, not your bride in some arcane ritual. That was not part of the arrangement with Thornfield." "Wasn't it?" Lord Dragomir closed the chest with a decisive click. "I suspect Thornfield knew exactly what he was providing. The man's greed is surpassed only by his ruthlessness. And yours, it seems." Her words were sharp, despite her fear. Lord Dragomir's expression hardened. "You speak of matters you don't understand. 3 centuries I have existed in shadow, prisoner to the night. The sun, have you any conception what it is to lose the sun, Eleanora? To watch it rise and set for 300 years, unable to feel its warmth upon your face." For a moment, she glimpsed something raw and aching in those silver eyes, something almost human, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by that calculating coldness. "Regardless, you have time to adjust to the idea," he continued. "The solstice is still 3 months away. Until then you will live in comfort, wanting for nothing." He extended his hand. "Come, the hour grows late, and you must be tired from your journey." Eleanora ignored his outstretched hand. "And if I refuse to participate in this ritual, if I will not be your bride?" His expression remained impassive, but the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "Then after 6 months, you will return to your family as agreed, to find that Thornfield has foreclosed on your father's debts. Your mother and sisters will be in a workhouse, your father in debtor's prison, and your ancestral home in other hands. Or perhaps," he tilted his head, studying her, "perhaps I would simply keep you here regardless. The choice of which fate befalls you is yours." "No choice at all, then?" Eleanora swallowed the bitter taste of desperation and nodded once. "I understand. Good." He gestured toward the stairway. "Tomorrow, after you've rested, we can discuss the particulars of your stay. For tonight, return to your chambers and sleep. Vasile will escort you." As if summoned by his name, the steward appeared at the entrance to the chamber, his face betraying no surprise at finding them in this secret place. Lord Dragomir gave her one last, lingering look before turning away, dismissing her as easily as he had in the great hall. Eleanora followed Vasile back through the winding corridors in silence, her mind racing. By the time they reached her chambers, she had made a decision. She would play along, for now, learn the castle's secrets, find a weakness and escape. 3 months was time enough to formulate a plan. "Sleep well, Miss Blackwood," Vasile said, his tone gentler than before. Was that sympathy in his eyes? "Morning comes early to the castle, even when its master cannot greet the dawn." As the door closed behind him, Eleonora sank onto the bed, still clothed in the burgundy gown that now seemed like a mockery. A bride. Not just a companion, but a vessel for some dark magic that would free Constantine Dragomir from his nocturnal prison. Her fingers traced the high collar of her dress, seeking the familiar outline of the small silver cross her grandmother had given her on her 16th birthday. She had tucked it beneath her clothing during the journey, unsure what to expect at the castle. Now it seemed a pitifully inadequate protection against the fate that awaited her. Sleep came fitfully that night, haunted by dreams of blood-red stones and silver eyes watching her from shadows. When she woke, pale winter sunlight streamed through windows that had been uncovered by unseen hands. Lydia arrived moments later with a breakfast tray and a cheerful demeanor that seemed incongruous with the grim revelations of the previous evening. "The master has instructed that you are free to explore the castle today, miss," Lydia informed her as she laid out a day dress of forest green. "Though some areas remain restricted. I imagine the crypt where he sleeps would be among those," Eleonora said, watching carefully for the maid's reaction. Lydia's hands stilled momentarily. "The master's private quarters are indeed forbidden," she said carefully, "as is the North Tower and the chambers beneath the East Wing." Useful information. Eleonora filed it away. "And where might I find Lord Dragomir after sunset?" "He often reads in the library until midnight, miss. Then he attends to other matters." Lydia helped her into the dress, which fit as perfectly as the evening gown had. "He requested that you join him there after dinner." "How considerate of him to arrange my schedule," Eleonora muttered. Lydia's expression softened unexpectedly. "He is not unkind, miss. Not like some of his kind. Those of us who serve in the castle are well treated, protected." "Protected from what?" The maid busied herself with tidying the breakfast tray. "There are worse things in these mountains than vampires, miss. Much worse." Before Eleonora could press further, Lydia curtsied and departed, leaving her alone with a head full of questions and no answers. With nothing else to do, she decided to take advantage of the freedom to explore, hoping to map the castle's layout in her mind. The daylight hours passed in a haze of discovery. Castle Ravenscroft was larger than she had initially thought, with entire wings that seemed abandoned, their furnishings draped in dust covers like shrouded ghosts. Others were immaculately maintained, suggesting regular use despite their master's solitary existence. She counted 4 separate libraries, a music room with instruments from every corner of the world, a gallery of paintings spanning centuries, and countless chambers whose purposes she could not determine. Throughout her exploration, she encountered servants going about their duties, all human as far as she could tell, though few would meet her eyes directly. They treated her with deference but maintained a careful distance, as though unsure of her status in the household. By late afternoon, she found herself in a solarium of sorts, a glass-walled chamber atop one of the western towers that captured the waning sunlight. Plants from tropical climes thrived in the regulated warmth, creating a jungle-like atmosphere that was a stark contrast to the snow-dusted mountains visible through the glass. "He built this for his mother," a voice said from behind her. Eleonora turned to find a woman she hadn't seen before, elderly but straight-backed, with silver hair coiled in an elegant knot and eyes the color of steel. Her dress was of a style fashionable 3 decades earlier, but the quality of the fabric and the emeralds at her throat spoke of wealth. "Forgive me," Eleonora said. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Countess Erzsébet Ravenscroft," the woman said, inclining her head slightly. "Constantine's aunt, or so we maintain for the sake of appearances." "You're human," Eleonora observed, noting the flush of life in the woman's cheeks. "How perceptive." The Countess moved further into the solarium, running a gnarled finger along the leaf of an exotic orchid. "As are you, though perhaps not for much longer." The casual statement sent a chill down Eleonora's spine. "You know of the ritual he plans." "Of course. I was there when the bloodstone was created, though I was merely a child then. My sister, Constantine's mother, was the sorceress who crafted it with her dying breath. The Countess fixed Eleonora with a penetrating stare. You have her eyes, the same shade of green. The bloodline is strong in you. So I'm told, Eleonora said warily, though I'm not certain how my distant relation to a Hungarian countess qualifies me for whatever Lord Dragomir has planned. Elizabeth Bathory was more than a countess, the elderly woman replied sharply. She was the most powerful practitioner of blood magic in 5 centuries, and what flows in your veins is not merely blood, child, but potential, power. She stepped closer, her gaze uncomfortably intense. Constantine chose you carefully, or rather, fate did. I don't believe in fate, Eleonora said firmly. Only in choices. The Countess laughed, a brittle sound like dry leaves rustling. Then you are woefully unprepared for what awaits you. She reached out, her cool fingers grasping Eleonora's wrist with surprising strength. Listen carefully, girl. The ritual will bind you to Constantine in ways you cannot imagine. Your soul to his, your life force intertwined with his immortality. It is not a union to be entered lightly. I didn't enter it at all, Eleonora protested. I was deceived. Perhaps. The Countess released her grip. But now you have a choice. Resist and suffer, or embrace your destiny and gain power beyond mortal understanding. What sort of power? Something calculating entered the Countess's expression. The kind that allows one to cheat death itself, to live centuries rather than decades, to command energies that most humans can scarcely comprehend. She straightened her spine. I was 67 years old when Constantine performed a similar ritual with me, though with different intent. That was 40 years ago. Eleonora stared at the woman with new understanding. The Countess didn't merely look good for her age. She looked impossibly preserved, a woman in her 60s rather than her hundreds. You're saying he extended your life, Eleonora said slowly, through blood magic. A gift for his mother's sister, a small taste of the immortality he himself possesses. The Countess smiled thinly. What he offers you is far greater, not just extended life, but power, partnership, eternity, at the cost of my humanity. Humanity, the Countess scoffed. A brief flicker of existence filled with pain, illness, loss, and the slow decay of everything you value. Why cling to something so fragile when something so magnificent is offered in its place? Before Eleonora could formulate a response, the light in the solarium shifted subtly. The sun had dipped below the mountain peaks, casting the glass chamber into premature twilight. The Countess straightened, as though sensing something Eleonora could not. He wakes, she said simply. You should prepare for dinner. He dislikes tardiness. She moved toward the door, then paused. Consider what I've said, Miss Blackwood. Few are offered the choice that lies before you. Fewer still have the wisdom to choose correctly. With that enigmatic statement she departed, leaving Eleonora alone among the exotic plants as darkness settled over the castle like a cloak. The Countess's words echoed in her mind as she made her way back to her chambers, where Lydia waited to help her dress for dinner. This time, the gown laid out for her was midnight blue, adorned with silver embroidery that mimicked the night sky. As Lydia secured the last fastening, Eleonora studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked like a night goddess. Beautiful, remote, touched by something otherworldly. Is this what he sees when he looks at me? She wondered. Not Eleonora Blackwood, daughter of a country squire, but a vessel for ancient blood magic, a means to an end? The thought hardened her resolve. Whatever power might lie dormant in her veins, it was hers to command, not his to exploit. She would find a way out of this trap, a way to save herself and her family without sacrificing her future to a creature of the night. Dinner was a similarly one-sided affair as the previous evening, though this time Lord Dragomir made no pretense of consuming mortal food. He sipped from his crystal goblet as Eleonora ate, their conversation remaining on neutral topics, literature, music, art. If he sensed her inner turmoil, he gave no indication of it. "I understand you met my aunt today," he said as servants cleared away her dessert plate. "I hope she didn't alarm you with her directness." "On the contrary," Eleonora replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "She was most informative about the nature of your plans for me." Something flickered in his silver eyes. Annoyance, perhaps. "Erzsébet has a tendency to involve herself in matters that do not concern her. Whatever she told you, she told me the ritual would bind our souls together," Eleonora interrupted, "that it would grant me extended life and certain powers in exchange for helping you walk in daylight once more." Lord Dragomir leaned back in his chair, studying her with newfound interest. "And what do you think of such an arrangement, now that you understand it more fully?" "I think," she said carefully, "that such a momentous decision deserves proper consideration. 3 months is barely enough time to comprehend the implications, let alone make an informed choice." His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yet, the solstice waits for no one, my dear. The alignment comes but once a year, and I have waited long enough." 3 centuries by your account." Eleonora set down her napkin. "Surely another year would make little difference." "It would make all the difference." His voice had hardened, the temperature in the room dropping several degrees. "The Bloodstone's power wanes with each passing decade. This may be the final opportunity to complete the ritual successfully." Eleonora sensed a half-truth in his words. "And if I still refuse?" Constantine rose in one fluid motion, circling the table to stand behind her chair. She felt his cool fingers brush the nape of her neck, sending involuntary shivers down her spine. "Then, as I said before, you will complete your 6 months and return to your family, to whatever fate awaits them." His voice softened, taking on a hypnotic quality. "But I don't think you will refuse, Eleonora, not when you begin to understand what I'm truly offering you." Before she could question his meaning, he had moved away, extending his hand to her. "Come. I promised to show you the library." The main library of Castle Ravenscroft proved to be larger than the village church Eleonora had attended all her life. Books lined walls that stretched 3 stories high, accessible by wrought-iron spiral staircases and rolling ladders. Volumes of every size and binding filled the shelves, ancient tomes bound in materials she dared not identify, modern first editions in crisp leather, scrolls and manuscripts in glass cases. The scent of parchment, ink and time itself filled the air. "My collection spans 2 millennia, Constantine said, watching her awed expression with something like pride. "Some of these works are the last surviving copies in existence. Others contain knowledge mankind has forgotten or been forced to forget." Eleonora approached one of the glass cases, peering at the illuminated manuscript within. The text was in no language she recognized, the illustrations depicting rituals that made her cheeks flush with their explicit nature. "Sumerian fertility rites," Constantine explained, appearing at her shoulder. "From before the rise of Babylon. The church destroyed most copies during the early Crusades, believing them to be demonic in nature." His fingers brushed hers on the glass. "The knowledge in this room, Eleonora, it could be yours. All of it. Centuries to study, to learn, to master arts long forgotten by the mortal world." The offer was tempting in a way she hadn't expected. Eleonora had always thirsted for knowledge, for understanding beyond what was available to a woman of her station. Here was a library that scholars would kill to access, filled with wisdom from ages past. "Knowledge is a powerful lure," she acknowledged, moving away from his touch. "But at what cost? What exactly happens during this ritual, my lord? What am I surrendering besides my humanity?" Constantine gestured to a seating area near a roaring fire where decanters of amber liquid waited on a side table. Once they were seated, he poured 2 glasses, offering one to her. "The ritual is complex," he began, swirling the liquid in his glass. "On the night of the winter solstice, when the boundary between worlds is thinnest, the bloodstone must be placed over your heart. I will recite incantations in the old tongue, binding our essences together." His silver eyes reflected the firelight as he continued. "Then I must take your blood, not all, but enough to establish the connection. You will take mine in return. Blood exchange, Eleonora said faintly, like creating another vampire. Similar, but not identical. You will not become fully vampiric, not immediately. The change will be gradual, allowing you to retain certain human qualities while gaining immortal ones. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. The ritual culminates in physical union. The final binding must be intimate in nature. Heat flooded Eleonora's cheeks as his meaning became clear. You're saying we must... Yes. His voice was soft, almost gentle. It is essential to the magic. Life force and pleasure intertwined, creating the channel through which the bloodstone's power can flow. She set down her untouched drink, her hands trembling slightly. And afterward? What then? Afterward, the stone's power will settle within us both. I will be able to walk in daylight once more, and you will begin your transformation, slower than a traditional turning, but inexorable. Within a year, you will have left most of your humanity behind. And become what exactly? Your thrall? Your slave? His expression hardened. My equal, Eleonora, my partner in eternity. Do you truly not understand what I'm offering you? Imprisonment, she countered. A cage, no matter how gilded. Constantine set down his glass with deliberate care. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You speak of imprisonment, yet you've never tasted true freedom. The freedom to move through centuries, watching empires rise and fall. The freedom from disease, from age, from the 1,000 natural shocks that mortal flesh is heir to. He rose, pacing before the fire. I'm offering you the stars, Eleonora, and you fixate on the momentary pain of transformation. Perhaps because I value what I would lose, she replied, rising to face him. My family, my future children, my soul. Your soul would remain your own, he said sharply. Changed, perhaps, but still yours. As for family, his expression softened unexpectedly. Your parents would be protected for the remainder of their natural lives. Your sisters provided for, their futures secured. I am not a monster who would sever all your mortal ties. The offer was more generous than she had expected, and for a moment, Eleonora wavered. Security for her family, wasn't that what had driven her to accept Thornfield's arrangement in the first place? I need time, she said finally. Time to consider everything you've told me. Constantine studied her, his ancient eyes unreadable. You have until the solstice to come to terms with your destiny, Eleonora. Use it wisely. He moved toward the door, then paused. The library is yours to explore. Knowledge is power, after all. Perhaps in these books you'll find answers to questions you haven't yet thought to ask. With that, he was gone, leaving her alone among the countless volumes. Eleonora sank back into her chair, mind reeling from everything she had learned. 3 months to decide her fate, 3 months to find an escape, or to embrace an eternity bound to a creature of the night. As she stared into the dancing flames, a strange certainty settled over her. Whatever Constantine Dragomir claimed about partnership and equality, he was withholding something crucial. There was more to the ritual than he had revealed, more to his interest in her than merely her Bathory blood, and she would discover what it was, even if she had to tear the castle apart, stone by stone, to find the truth. The winter storm howled against the castle walls like a living thing as Eleonora pored over the ancient text, her eyes burning from hours of study. 6 weeks had passed since her arrival at Castle Ravenscroft, and with each day, the winter solstice drew nearer. The library had become her sanctuary and her battleground, a place to search for answers and, perhaps, salvation. You'll strain your eyes reading by such dim light, Constantine's voice came from the doorway, startling her. He moved silently into the library, a dark silhouette against the dancing shadows. It's nearly dawn. You've been here all night. Eleonora closed the leather-bound volume carefully. I lost track of time. He approached, glancing at the scattered books on her table, texts on Hungarian folklore, blood magic, and the Bathory lineage. A knowing smile curved his lips. "Finding what you're looking for?" "Pieces," she admitted. Over the weeks, she had adopted a strategy of careful honesty with him. Complete truth was unnecessary, but outright lies would only raise his suspicions. "Your collection is extensive, the benefit of centuries." He picked up one of the volumes, a genealogy of noble Hungarian families. "Your ancestors feature prominently here. Elizabeth was not the only Bathory with remarkable qualities." "So I've discovered." Eleonora watched him carefully. In their time together, she had come to understand him better, his moods, his habits, the careful mask he wore to conceal deeper emotions. Tonight he seemed almost anxious. "The storm is worsening." "Yes." Constantine set down the book. "The mountain passes will soon be impassable. We are effectively cut off until spring." "How convenient for you," she observed, unable to keep the edge from her voice. His silver eyes flashed. "The weather is beyond even my control, Eleonora. But not unwelcome, surely." She rose, gathering the books into a neat pile. "No possibility of unexpected visitors. No chance of your bride-to-be escaping into the wilderness." Constantine's jaw tightened. "You've become bolder in your speech, and you've become more transparent in your intentions." Eleonora met his gaze steadily. "I've been reading about the Bloodstone ritual. The texts describe it differently than you did." Something flickered across his face, concern, perhaps even fear. "Ancient texts are often subject to interpretation." "Perhaps. But when 3 separate sources mention a sacrifice, I begin to wonder what you're not telling me." She stepped closer, emboldened by weeks of research and growing certainty. "The ritual doesn't just bind us, does it? It transfers something between us." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Constantine sighed, a surprisingly human gesture. "You were always going to discover it," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Your intelligence is one of the qualities that makes you perfect for this." "Perfect for what exactly?" Eleonora pressed. "What happens during the solstice?" "The whole truth, Constantine." He moved to the window, watching the snow swirl in the pre-dawn darkness. "The Bloodstone ritual will indeed allow me to walk in daylight again, but that is merely one effect of a more fundamental transformation." He turned to face her. "What I seek is redemption, Eleonora. Release from a curse laid upon me 3 centuries ago." "What curse?" "Immortality without peace, existence without warmth. I cannot feel, Eleonora, not as humans do." His expression grew distant. "It was my punishment for defying the vampire who created me. He took more than my humanity. He took my capacity for true emotion, left me with intellect, memory, desire, but no genuine feeling." Eleonora frowned. "But I've seen you angry, amused, even interested." Shadows of emotions, pale imitations. He moved closer, his movements deliberate. "I remember what it was to feel joy, grief, love, but I experienced them as if through thick glass, muted, distant." "And the ritual would restore this to you?" "Yes." His eyes held hers, desperate intensity radiating from him. "The Bloodstone can transfer emotional capacity from one being to another. Your Bathory blood makes you compatible, a perfect vessel for the exchange." The realization struck her like ice water. "You would take my emotions, my capacity to feel." "Not all," he said quickly. "The ritual creates balance. What I gain, you would lose in equal measure. You would retain some emotional capacity, as I have, but the depth, the intensity would be diminished." Eleonora stepped back, horror washing over her. "You would make me like you, cold, distant, only half alive." "I would make you immortal," he countered. "Free from the pain that emotions bring, the grief, the heartbreak, the despair that plague humanity, along with joy, love, and compassion," she whispered. "Everything that makes life worth living." Constantine reached for her, but she evaded his touch. "You would adapt as I did, and we would have eternity together, both walking in daylight, both sharing the same emotional capacity. True equals, equal in our incompleteness," Eleonora said bitterly. "That's not partnership, Constantine. It's mutual diminishment." His expression hardened. "You speak from the privilege of one who has never known centuries of isolation, of watching everyone you care for wither and die while you endure, unchanging." He turned away, his shoulders rigid. "Consider carefully before you judge what I offer as insufficient." "And if I refuse?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then you complete your 6 months and return to your mortal life." He didn't look at her. "But know this, Eleonora, you will never again find someone who understands you as I do, who can offer what I offer. Mortal life is fleeting, brutal in its brevity. But it is whole," she replied softly, "complete in its imperfection." He said nothing more, departing as silently as he had arrived, leaving Eleonora alone with her thoughts and the howling storm beyond the walls. The following days passed in a strange equilibrium. Constantine neither pressed his case nor avoided her company. Instead, their evenings continued as before. Dinners, conversations in the library, occasional music in the grand salon, where Eleonora would play the pianoforte while he listened, his expression unreadable. Yet something had shifted between them. The truth of the ritual hung in the air, acknowledged but undiscussed. Eleonora continued her research, now with new purpose, seeking not just escape, but understanding. It was on a rare, clear night, with the moon illuminating the snow-covered mountains, that she made her most significant discovery. In a hidden compartment of an antique writing desk, she found a journal written in a delicate feminine hand, Constantine's mother, the sorceress who had created the bloodstone. The journal was in Hungarian, which Eleonora could read only haltingly, but enough to understand the crucial passages. The ritual Constantine had described was indeed possible, but incomplete. There was a third option beyond success or failure. "Balance," she whispered to herself, tracing the faded words. Not transfer, but harmony. The original intent of the bloodstone had not been to steal emotion from one being to give to another, but to create a bridge between them, allowing both to experience the full spectrum of feeling. It required not sacrifice, but willing surrender, a mutual opening of heart and mind. But there was risk involved. If either participant held back, protected themselves, the magic would revert to the simpler transfer, taking from one to give to the other. The sorceress had warned explicitly against coercion or deception for this reason. As Eleonora turned the page, another revelation awaited. The ritual could only be performed once in a vampire's existence. If it failed, or if it succeeded in the lesser form of transfer rather than harmony, there would be no second chance. She closed the journal, heart pounding. Did Constantine know this? Had he read his mother's warning and chosen to ignore it, or was he as ignorant as she had been? The answer came 3 nights later, when she found him in the portrait gallery, staring up at a painting of a beautiful dark-haired woman with familiar silver eyes. "Your mother?" Eleonora asked, coming to stand beside him. Constantine nodded, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "Mariska. She was extraordinary, powerful beyond measure, yet gentle in her heart. She tried to protect me from what I would become." "How did she die?" "Protecting me from my creator. He sought to use me as a weapon against rival vampire clans. She intervened, cast a spell that weakened him enough for me to break free." His voice grew distant. "With her dying breath, she created the bloodstone, telling me it would one day restore what had been taken from me." Eleonora studied him carefully. "Did she tell you how the ritual should be performed?" "She had no time." Bitterness tinged his words, "only enough strength to craft the stone and whisper that I must find someone of her bloodline. The details I pieced together over centuries, from texts and rumors and the rare testimony of those who had witnessed similar magic." "And you never found her journal?" Konstantin's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. What journal? The genuineness of his surprise confirmed her suspicion. Your mother kept a record of her work, including the true purpose of the bloodstone ritual. Eleonora took a deep breath. It was never meant to transfer emotion from one to another, Konstantin. It was meant to create harmony, allowing both participants to experience the full spectrum of feeling. For a moment he stared at her in disbelief. Then something like hope flickered across his face, quickly replaced by skepticism. If such a journal existed, I would have found it centuries ago. It was hidden in a secret compartment of her writing desk. Perhaps she meant for you to find it when you were ready. Eleonora held his gaze. Or perhaps she knew you would need to find someone who would discover it independently. Someone who wouldn't simply accept your interpretation of the ritual. Konstantin turned away, his posture rigid. Show me. The journal lay where Eleonora had left it, tucked back into its hiding place. As Konstantin lifted it with trembling hands, recognition flooded his features. Her handwriting, he whispered, fingers tracing the faded ink. Though he could clearly read the Hungarian text faster than Eleonora, he took his time, absorbing every word with growing intensity. When he finally looked up, the mask had slipped completely, revealing raw emotion she had never witnessed in him before. All these years, he said, his voice barely audible, I thought I had to take what I needed, that someone had to lose for me to gain. The ritual your mother designed requires no sacrifice, Eleonora said gently. Only mutual vulnerability, complete trust. Trust, he repeated, as though the concept were foreign. Something rarely offered to creatures like me. With good reason, perhaps. She met his gaze steadily. You were prepared to take half my emotional capacity without fully explaining what that meant. Shame, an emotion she would never have expected from him, crossed his features. Yes, I was. His honesty surprised her. For weeks she had seen Konstantin as her captor, her would-be exploiter. Now, for the first time, she glimpsed something else, a being trapped in his own form of prison, desperate for release. The solstice is in 3 weeks, she said carefully. We have time to reconsider the ritual, to understand it properly. Hope and suspicion warred in his expression. Why would you even consider proceeding? You've made your feelings about immortality clear. I've made my feelings about exploitation clear, Eleonora corrected. This is different. She hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. I don't know if I want immortality, Konstantin. But I know I don't want anyone to suffer as you have, if I have the power to prevent it. He studied her with newfound wonder. Compassion, perhaps the emotion I've missed most acutely. He closed the journal gently. You continue to surprise me, Eleonora Blackwood. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Vasile entered, his typically impassive expression replaced by one of barely concealed alarm. Forgive the intrusion, master, but there are riders approaching the castle, armed men, led by Lord Thornfield. Konstantin's demeanor shifted instantly, the vulnerable being of moments ago replaced by the dangerous predator Eleonora had first encountered. Thornfield, what business brings him here in such weather? I cannot say, master, but they appear hostile. Eleonora felt cold dread pool in her stomach. He's come for me, she said with sudden certainty, or rather for what I represent. Konstantin turned to her, confusion evident. Explain. I've been reading about the Bathory bloodline, she said quickly, about the power it carries. Thornfield knew exactly what he was delivering to you, not just a companion, but a key to the ritual. He must have expected payment beyond what you already gave him. And now he comes to collect, Konstantin finished, understanding dawning. But why now, before the ritual is complete? A terrible suspicion formed in Eleonora's mind. Unless he doesn't want it completed at all. Unless someone else has offered him more to prevent it. She met Konstantin's gaze. Your creator still lives, doesn't he? The silence that followed confirmed her fear. Dragomir! Thornfield's voice echoed from the courtyard below, carried through the castle by some trick of acoustics. "Send out the girl, and we'll depart peacefully. Refuse, and we'll take her by force." Constantine moved to the window, his expression darkening as he surveyed the scene below. 20 men, heavily armed. Silver weapons, if I'm not mistaken. "You're outnumbered," Eleonora said, fear evident in her voice. "I've faced worse odds." His tone was deadly calm. "Vasile, secure the Countess in the east wing. Activate the castle's defenses. No one enters without my permission." As Vasile hurried to obey, Constantine turned to Eleonora. "You should join my aunt. You'll be safer there." "And what will you do?" His silver eyes gleamed with predatory intent. "Remind Lord Thornfield why creatures like me are feared in the first place." "Wait," Eleonora caught his arm. "You can't kill them all. It would bring the entire region down upon this castle. What would you suggest? Surrender you to Thornfield's tender mercies?" "No." Eleonora's mind raced. "But there may be another way. The journal mentioned that the Bloodstone has power even before the ritual, that it can be used for protection, for creating barriers against mortal threats." "Yes," Constantine acknowledged, "but such workings are complex, requiring preparation. We don't need complexity. We need time." Determination filled her voice. "Let me speak to Thornfield. Stall him while you prepare the stone. Whatever his new patron is paying him, offer more." Doubt crossed Constantine's features. "He won't negotiate in good faith. He doesn't need to. He only needs to believe he's winning until we're ready." Eleonora squeezed his arm. "Trust me, Constantine, as you'll need to trust me for the ritual." For a long moment he studied her, conflict evident in his expression. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well. But at the first sign of danger I will intervene, violently if necessary." "Understood." Eleonora took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Where is the Bloodstone kept?" "In my private chambers. The entrance is concealed behind the fireplace in the library." He hesitated, then pressed a ring into her palm, silver set with a small black stone. "This will grant you access. Bring the chest to the great hall. I'll meet you there after I've dealt with our uninvited guests." As Eleonora hurried toward the library, the sounds of confrontation echoed from the courtyard below. She tried not to think about what might be happening, what Constantine might be doing to buy her time. Instead, she focused on her task, finding the hidden lever behind an ornate sconce that caused the fireplace to swing silently inward. Beyond lay a chamber, unlike any she had seen in the castle. Modern, almost austere in its furnishings, with a large four-poster bed draped in black silk. On a pedestal in the center sat the wooden chest she remembered from the ritual chamber. The ring Constantine had given her warmed against her skin as she approached. When she touched the chest, the lock clicked open without a key, revealing the bloodstone nestled on black velvet. In the dim light, the stone seemed to pulse with inner fire, its deep red surfaces capturing and reflecting what little illumination reached it. As her fingers closed around the stone, a jolt of energy shot up her arm, not painful, but intensely present. Images flooded her mind. Constantine through the centuries, always alone, always watching from shadows as the world changed around him, his isolation, his longing, his regret. "He truly has suffered," she whispered, understanding now what he had tried to explain. The stone grew warmer in her grasp, as if responding to her empathy. According to the journal, the bloodstone required emotional connection to activate its power, a resonance between the holder and their intent. Eleonora closed her eyes, focusing on what she wanted: protection for the castle, for Constantine, for herself. Time to understand the ritual properly before the solstice arrived. The stone pulsed again, stronger this time, and she felt something shift within her, a drawing together of energies she hadn't known she possessed. The sound of breaking glass and shouting from below told her that Thornfield's men had breached the castle. She had to hurry. Clutching the bloodstone to her chest, Eleonora rushed toward the great hall, praying she wasn't too late. As she reached the main staircase, she saw him, Constantine, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, blood staining his white shirt. Not his blood, she realized with a shiver. They've breached the east wing, he said urgently. Thornfield has more men than we thought, coming through the old tunnels. Did you get the stone? She opened her hand, revealing the bloodstone glowing within a fire. Yes, but... A deafening explosion rocked the castle, sending stone dust cascading from the ceiling. Constantine's expression turned grim. They're using gunpowder charges. We need to act now. He reached for the stone, but as their fingers touched, another vision overwhelmed Eleonora. Not of Constantine's past this time, but of what could be. The ritual completed not in transfer, but in harmony. Two beings, vampire and human, sharing the full spectrum of emotion, daylight accessible to both, a partnership spanning centuries. "Eleonora!" Constantine's voice snapped her back to the present. "We must hurry!" The stone burned brighter between them, responding to their combined touch. Eleonora felt power surging through her veins, ancient and primal. The journal had mentioned this, the Bathory blood awakening in the presence of the stone, revealing its true potential. "I know what to do," she said with sudden certainty. "But Constantine, we need to be sure. Once we use the stone's power this way, it will be changed. The ritual at the solstice will be affected." His silver eyes met hers, understanding the choice before them. "What are you suggesting?" "A partial invocation now. Enough to drive Thornfield away, but not so much that we can't complete the ritual as your mother intended." She held his gaze. "But it means trusting me completely, allowing me to channel the stone's power through both of us." Another explosion, closer this time. The sound of fighting echoed from multiple directions. They were running out of time. Constantine's expression shifted from doubt to determination. "What do you need me to do?" "Hold my hands. Open your mind to mine." Eleonora positioned the bloodstone between their palms. "And whatever happens, don't let go." As their fingers intertwined around the stone, its glow intensified, bathing them in crimson light. Eleonora closed her eyes, drawing on instincts she hadn't known she possessed, speaking words in a language she had never learned but somehow understood, her ancestors' tongue, awakened by the stone's power. The bloodstone grew hotter, pulsing like a heart between their joined hands. Eleonora felt Constantine's consciousness brush against hers, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as she welcomed him in. Not a full joining, not yet, but a glimpse of what the ritual might offer. Energy surged through them both, building to a crescendo that made the very air around them crackle with power. When Eleonora opened her eyes, the stone was no longer red, but white-hot, too brilliant to look at directly. "Now," she whispered, and together they released the gathered energy. A shockwave of crimson light exploded outward from where they stood, racing through the castle like wildfire. Eleonora heard screams, crashes, the sound of men fleeing in terror. The power continued to build rather than dissipate, surrounding the castle in a dome of pulsing energy that rippled like the surface of a disturbed pond. Through her connection to Constantine, she felt his awe at what they had created together, and his shock at experiencing, however briefly, the emotional depth he had been denied for centuries. As the energy settled into a steady barrier around the castle, Constantine stared at her with newfound wonder. "How did you know how to do that?" "I didn't," she admitted, breathless from the effort. "The stone guided me. Or perhaps your blood," he finished. The Bathory power awakening. The bloodstone had dimmed between them, no longer the vibrant crimson it had been, but a deeper, more complex hue, like wine held to sunlight. Its transformation mirrored something Eleonora felt within herself, a change, subtle but undeniable. "Thornfield?" she asked, suddenly remembering the immediate threat. "Gone, along with his men. The barrier expelled them." Constantine's expression darkened. "But they'll return, with greater numbers and better preparation. We've bought time, nothing more." "Time is what we needed." Eleonora looked down at their still joined hands, the altered stone cradled between them. Constantine, what we just did, that connection, it was only a fraction of what the full ritual would create. I know. His voice held a mixture of wonder and trepidation. For a moment, I felt everything, completely, as I haven't since I was human. And I felt your absence of feeling, she said softly. The emptiness you carry. They stood in silence, the implications of what had transpired hanging between them. Finally, Constantine spoke, his voice carefully controlled. The stone has changed. What does that mean for the ritual? Before Eleonora could answer, the Countess appeared in the doorway, her normally perfect composure shattered. Blood stained her sleeve, and her silver hair had come loose from its careful arrangement. "Constantine," she gasped, "they've taken her." "Taken who?" he demanded, crossing to support the elderly woman. The Countess's eyes met Eleonora's, filled with a terrible knowledge. "Lydia, Thornfield's men captured her during their retreat. They left a message." She held out a blood-stained note. "The girl for the stone. An exchange at dawn in the village square." Constantine's expression turned murderous as he read the note. "Thornfield will die for this." "Lydia is my maid," Eleonora said, horror washing over her. "They took her because of me, because of her connection to us both," the Countess corrected grimly, "and because Thornfield knows my nephew's weakness for those under his protection." She fixed Constantine with a sharp gaze. "You cannot go. It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," he snarled, "but I will not abandon one of my household." "Dawn is in 3 hours," the Countess argued. "You would be vulnerable even with your powers." "Not if I go in his place," Eleonora said suddenly. Both turned to stare at her. "No," Constantine said flatly. "Listen to me." Eleonora held up the altered bloodstone. "What we did changed the stone, but it also changed me. I can feel it. The power in my blood has awakened." She met his gaze steadily. "I can use it to save Lydia without risking your exposure to sunlight." "Absolutely not." Constantine's voice brooked no argument. "Thornfield wouldn't hesitate to kill you both once he had the stone." "He won't have the real stone," Eleonora countered. "We'll create a duplicate, a convincing one. The journal mentioned your mother had that ability." The Countess was studying Eleonora with new interest. "It could work. The girl's blood is strong, stronger than I realized." Constantine looked between them, frustration evident. "Even if you could create such a deception, I won't risk you walking into Thornfield's hands." "You don't have a choice," Eleonora said softly. "Our barrier won't hold forever. Thornfield's new patron, your creator, won't give up. Eventually he'll find a way to breach our defenses, and when he does, he'll destroy everything you've built here." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Including any chance of completing the ritual as your mother intended." His jaw tightened, conflict evident in his expression. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A counter-strike," Eleonora said, determination flooding her voice. "We don't just save Lydia, we end Thornfield's threat permanently." She held up the bloodstone, its altered surface catching the firelight. "And we discover exactly who he's working for and why they're so determined to prevent our ritual." As Constantine stared at her, something shifted in his silver eyes. Respect mingled with a new emotion she couldn't quite name. "It seems I have underestimated you, Eleonora Blackwood." "Most men do," she replied with the ghost of a smile. "Now shall we plan our strategy? Dawn approaches, and we have much to prepare." The bloodstone pulsed once between them, as if in agreement or warning. The mountains held their breath as dawn approached, painting the snow-covered peaks in hues of rose gold that belied the tension gripping Castle Ravenscroft. Eleonora stood in the east-facing tower, gazing across the valley to where the village nestled like a child's toy among the pines. Somewhere there, Lydia waited, frightened, perhaps already harmed, because of her connection to this place. The weight of the false bloodstone hung heavy around Eleonora's neck. its crafted surface a convincing replica of the original, which remained safely hidden in Constantine's chambers. Creating it had drained her in ways she hadn't anticipated, drawing on newly awakened abilities that left her simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. "The sun rises in 20 minutes, Constantine's voice came from behind her. He remained in the shadows of the stairwell, unable to risk even the indirect light of dawn. "Are you certain of this plan?" Eleonora turned to face him, struck by how vulnerable he appeared in this moment, this ancient, powerful being, watching her with barely concealed concern. "As certain as I can be. The Countess has arranged everything as we discussed. Thornfield is dangerous, but not particularly intelligent," Constantine said, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "His new patron, however, your creator," Eleonora supplied when he faltered. "You've never spoken his name." "Names have power," he replied simply, "especially his. But understand this, if he's truly behind Thornfield's actions, he will not be deceived easily. He is ancient, cunning, and utterly without mercy." Eleonora moved closer, stopping just short of the line where shadow met growing daylight. "Then we must be more cunning still." Constantine's expression softened as he studied her. "You've changed since you arrived here, Eleonora Blackwood. For better or worse. Both, perhaps." His hand reached out, hovering just shy of touching her face. "Promise me you'll exercise the utmost caution. If you sense danger, true danger, use the signal we arranged. I may not be able to come to you directly, but my agents in the village will respond immediately." She nodded, acutely aware of the small silver whistle concealed beneath her cloak, enchanted by the Countess to emit a sound only Constantine's servants could hear. "I'll return with Lydia before midday, and with answers." "Return regardless of answers," he said softly. "The ritual means nothing if you are not here to complete it." The sentiment behind his words warmed her more than she cared to admit. These weeks in his company had complicated her feelings in ways she hadn't anticipated. Where once she had seen only a monster, a captor, she now perceived a being of profound complexity, damaged by centuries of isolation, yet still capable of evolution, of growth. And if she were honest with herself, of igniting something within her that no mortal man ever had. "The sleigh is prepared, miss," Vasily announced from the doorway, his face bearing the marks of the previous night's battle. "We should depart if we wish to arrive by the appointed hour." With a final glance at Constantine, his silver eyes luminous even in shadow, Eleonora followed the steward down to the courtyard, where a black sleigh awaited, pulled by horses whose breath clouded in the frigid air. The barrier they had created still shimmered around the castle perimeter, visible only as a slight distortion, like heat rising from summer roads. "Remember," the Countess said, appearing suddenly beside the sleigh, "the false stone will withstand cursory examination, but it cannot channel power as the true bloodstone does. If Thornfield attempts to test it, I'll be long gone with Lydia before he has the chance," Eleonora assured her. "The market square will be crowded for the winter fair. He won't risk exposure." The elderly woman's steel-grey eyes held hers. "Do not underestimate desperation, child. It makes fools reckless and the cunning careless." With those cryptic words, she stepped back, allowing Vasily to help Eleonora into the sleigh. As they crossed the barrier, a shiver passed through her, a momentary resistance, as though the castle itself were reluctant to let her go. The journey down the mountain pass was tense but uneventful, the fresh snow muffling the sleigh's runners and the horses' hooves. Eleonora used the time to center herself, to feel the power that had awakened in her blood. It wasn't the raw, predatory strength of Constantine's vampirism, but something older, more elemental, the Bathory gift, dormant for generations until the Bloodstone's touch had called it forth. By the time they reached the village outskirts, the sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the main road. As predicted, the winter fair had drawn crowds despite the recent storm. Farmers displayed root vegetables and preserved meats. Weavers offered wool blankets and scarves. Children darted between stalls, their cheeks red with cold and excitement. Vasile guided the sleigh to the edge of the square, where they could observe without immediately being observed. "Lord Thornfield's men are positioned at each corner," he murmured, nodding subtly toward figures trying too hard to look casual. "At least 10 that I can see." "And Lydia?" Eleonora scanned the crowd anxiously. "There." Vasile indicated the village well at the square's center, where a cloaked figure sat alone, her head bowed. Even from this distance, Eleonora could see that Lydia's hands were bound before her. Anger surged within her, hot and clarifying. She had come to care deeply for the quiet maid who had served her these past weeks. To see her used as a pawn in Thornfield's schemes ignited something protective and fierce. "Lord Thornfield approaches from the eastern side," Vasile observed. "The inn there belongs to his cousin. He likely spent the night plotting his triumph." Indeed, Thornfield emerged from the building Vasile indicated, flanked by 2 burly men whose coats bulged suspiciously at the waist. Weapons, certainly. His thin face bore a self-satisfied smile as he surveyed the square, his gaze eventually landing on their sleigh. "You know what to do," Eleonora said quietly to Vasile, who nodded once before slipping away to take up his position. Drawing her cloak tighter, she stepped into the square alone, conscious of every eye that turned to follow her progress. The villagers knew her, or at least knew of her, the woman who had gone to Castle Ravenscroft as a companion and mysteriously returned. Whispers followed in her wake, but she kept her focus on Lydia, whose head had lifted at her approach. "Miss Blackwood," the maid breathed, relief and fear mingling in her voice. A bruise darkened one cheek, and her lip was split. "You shouldn't have come. It's a trap." "I know," Eleonora replied softly, crouching to examine Lydia's bonds. "But I couldn't leave you to Thornfield's mercies." "How touching!" Thornfield's voice interrupted them. He stood a few paces away, his men forming a loose circle around the well. "Miss Blackwood, how kind of you to join our little gathering. I trust you've brought what I requested." Eleonora rose slowly, turning to face him with a composure she didn't entirely feel. "I have, but first release Lydia. That was our agreement. After I've verified the stone." Thornfield held out his hand. "My employer is particular about such things." "Your employer," Eleonora repeated, making no move to surrender the replica. "I'd be interested to know who values the bloodstone enough to risk attacking Castle Ravenscroft." Thornfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Business associates should maintain certain confidences, don't you agree? Now, the stone, if you please." "After Lydia walks free," Eleanor insisted, her hand drifting to the concealed whistle. Around the square, she noted several villagers watching with too much intensity, Constantine's agents, positioned as planned. For a long moment, Thornfield seemed to weigh his options. Then, with a curt nod to one of his men, he stepped back. "Cut her bonds, but she stays within reach until I have the stone." As the man moved to obey, Eleonora caught Lydia's gaze, giving a tiny nod. The maid's eyes widened fractionally in understanding. "Now," Thornfield said as Lydia was hauled to her feet, "the bloodstone." With deliberate slowness, Eleonora withdrew the false stone from beneath her cloak, letting it dangle from its silver chain. In the morning light, it gleamed convincingly, its deep red surface capturing the sun's rays. Thornfield's breath caught audibly. "Bring it here." "Send Lydia to me first," Eleonora countered. "An exchange, as promised." Frustration flashed across his features, but after a moment's hesitation, he gestured for his man to release Lydia. The maid stumbled forward, and Eleonora caught her arm, steadying her while positioning herself between Lydia and Thornfield. "Go to the sleigh," she whispered. "Vasile is waiting." As Lydia hurried away, Eleonora held up the false stone once more. "As agreed, Lord Thornfield. Though I wonder what you hope to gain from it without someone of Bathory blood to activate its power." Uncertainty flickered in his eyes, a telling hesitation. "That is not your concern. Hand it over." Instead of obeying, Eleonora closed her fist around the stone. Who hired you, Thornfield? What did they offer that was worth betraying your business arrangements with Constantine Dragomir? A great deal more than playing courier for a vampire lord, he snapped, his patience visibly wearing thin. The stone. Now. Very well. Eleonora extended her hand, the replica dangling from her fingers. Take it, if you're certain that's what you want. Thornfield reached for it eagerly. Too eagerly, his fingers closing around the chain. The moment he touched it, the false stone flared with unexpected light, and he jerked back with a cry of pain, dropping it into the snow. What trickery is this? He demanded, nursing his reddened fingers. Eleonora felt a surge of power within her, responding to her emotions, anger, protectiveness, determination, the awakened Bathory blood. No trickery, Lord Thornfield, merely judgment. The stone responds to intent. Impossible, he hissed. You've enchanted it somehow, perhaps. Or perhaps it simply recognizes treachery. Eleonora bent to retrieve the replica, which had ceased glowing. Now I believe our business is concluded. Lydia is safe, and you have learned that the bloodstone cannot be claimed through deception or force. Thornfield's face twisted with rage. You think this ends here? My employer will not be denied. He has waited centuries for the bloodstone, for the power it contains. Centuries, Eleonora repeated, a chill running down her spine. Then your employer is a vampire, Constantine's creator, I imagine. Something flickered in Thornfield's eyes, fear quickly masked. You know nothing. I know enough. Eleonora straightened, summoning every ounce of authority she could muster. Tell your master that the bloodstone will never be his. It belongs to Constantine Dragomir by right of inheritance, and to me by right of blood. Any further attempts to claim it will be met with consequences. As if responding to her words, the false stone pulsed once more, casting her shadow long across the snow. Thornfield took an involuntary step back, and his men exchanged uneasy glances. This isn't over, he warned, though his voice held less conviction than before. For today, it is. Eleonora turned her back on him, a calculated risk, and walked slowly toward the waiting sleigh, where Lydia and Vasily watched anxiously. She had taken no more than 5 steps when she heard the distinctive click of a pistol being cocked. The stone! Thornfield called after her, desperation edging his voice. Leave it, or I'll put a bullet in your back. Eleonora froze, her hand moving instinctively to the concealed whistle. Before she could use it, however, a new voice rang out across the square, cultured, melodious, and carrying an undercurrent of ancient power that made the very air vibrate. I wouldn't advise that, Lord Thornfield. A figure stepped from the shadows of a nearby stall, a woman of startling beauty, her red-gold hair framing a face of such perfect symmetry it seemed almost unnatural. Though dressed in the simple garb of a village merchant, she carried herself with regal bearing. You would be dead before your finger completed its pressure on the trigger, the woman continued pleasantly. And I assure you, it would not be a clean death. Thornfield's face drained of colour. Who? An interested party, she replied, moving to stand beside Eleonora. Up close, her eyes revealed her nature, ancient, predatory, and unmistakably vampiric, though a rich amber rather than Constantin's silver, one who finds your actions here distasteful. Eleonora felt the woman's power like heat from a furnace, older even than Constantine's, and wilder somehow. You're one of his kind, she said softly. The woman's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. His kind, yes, though not his allegiance. She turned that smile on Thornfield, who visibly shrank from it. Run back to your master, little man. Tell him Liliana sends her regards and a warning. The Bathory line is under my protection now. With a strangled sound that might have been acknowledgement, Thornfield backed away, then turned and fled, his men scrambling to follow. The square erupted in confused murmurs as villagers tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. We should go, the woman, Liliana, said calmly. Your friend needs medical attention, and you and I have much to discuss before we return to the castle." "Return?" Eleonora echoed, still processing everything that had transpired. "You're coming with us?" Liliana's amber eyes held a mixture of amusement and ancient sorrow. "Of course. Constantine and I have unfinished business, 3 centuries worth, in fact." She glanced at the false stone, still clutched in Eleonora's hand. "And it seems you and I share a common interest in his welfare." As they approached the sleigh, Vasily's expression shifted from wary relief to shocked recognition. He dropped to one knee in the snow, head bowed. "My lady, we did not know you were in the region." "That was rather the point, Vasily." Liliana gestured for him to rise. "Your loyalty to my son does you credit. Now shall we depart? I believe we've provided enough gossip to sustain this village through the winter." "Son." The word echoed in Eleonora's mind as they settled into the sleigh. Lydia wrapped in blankets and Liliana seated across from them with casual grace. Constantine's mother, the sorceress who had created the Bloodstone, who had supposedly died protecting him from his creator. "You have questions?" Liliana observed, as the sleigh began its ascent back toward the castle. "That's good. Curiosity has always been the hallmark of the Bathory women." "You're supposed to be dead," Eleonora said bluntly. "Constantine believes you died centuries ago." A necessary deception at the time. Genuine regret colored Liliana's voice. "My death allowed me to work against Constantine's creator from the shadows, while the Bloodstone protected my son from the worst effects of his curse." "But not from all of them," Eleonora countered. "He suffered for 300 years, believing himself abandoned." Liliana's ageless eyes met hers unflinchingly. "And you judge me for this? Good. Your heart is as strong as your blood." She leaned forward. What Constantine could not know, what would have destroyed him had he discovered it, was that his creator is his father, my husband, who betrayed us both when he embraced darkness over love. The revelation struck Eleonora like a physical blow. His father? But why would he curse his own son? Because Constantine rejected the path his father had chosen, because he threatened to expose what Radovan had become. Liliana's voice hardened. "And because Radovan discovered that our son's blood carried unique properties, a perfect fusion of my magical lineage and his vampiric one. He sought to harness that power for himself. The same power that's awakened in me through the Bloodstone," Eleonora realized. "The Bathory gift." Liliana nodded. "Though yours comes naturally through blood relation rather than the artificial bond Radovan tried to create. When I crafted the Bloodstone, I did so knowing it would eventually lead to this moment, to you, Eleonora Blackwood, and the choice you now face." "The ritual," Eleonora whispered. "You knew someone of your bloodline would complete it." "I hoped." Liliana's expression softened. "Hope is a rare commodity for beings like me. But I never abandoned it where my son was concerned." Her gaze turned distant, watching the castle grow larger as they approached. "The winter solstice approaches. The barrier you and Constantine created won't hold against Radovan forever. If the ritual is to be completed as intended, it must happen soon." As the sleigh passed through the shimmering barrier surrounding Castle Ravenscroft, Eleonora felt the weight of destiny settling upon her shoulders. No longer was this simply about a 6-month arrangement or even about saving herself from an unwanted fate. It had become something larger, a confluence of bloodlines, ancient powers, and the possibility of redemption not just for Constantine, but for all those connected to him. And at the center of it all stood Eleonora herself, a woman who had arrived as a reluctant sacrifice, but who now held the power to heal centuries of darkness, if she chose to embrace it. The castle doors swung open as they arrived, and there in the shadows stood Constantine, his silver eyes widening in disbelief as he beheld the woman who stepped from the sleigh. "Mother," he whispered, the word carrying 300 years of loss, betrayal, and impossible hope. Liliana moved forward, stopping at the threshold between sunlight and shadow. "Hello, my son," she said softly. I believe it's time we completed what we began so long ago. And as the winter sun climbed higher in the sky, casting the castle in stark relief against the snow-covered mountains, Eleonora knew with sudden certainty that the ritual awaiting them at the solstice would transform not just Constantine and herself, but the very nature of the power that had bound them together from the beginning. A power born of blood, magic, and something deeper still. Something that, despite everything, felt remarkably like love.